to what Molly said. I'm going to echo a lot of her points. I want to show you visuals of some of what she's talking about and try to provide a little bit more background to some of the things she was saying. So we'll work our way through it. And like I said, I'll try to get through this pretty quick, all right? So let's begin. And we're talking about, obviously, what could be considered a crisis in the sense that it's an incursion, a colonial incursion onto indigenous territory. And to begin with, you've got to recognize this is all about the land. So the Minnesotan people refer to it as the Yinta. That's their land, their territory. And we have to start there. That's really where the story really begins. And to understand this, you have to look at the beauty of the land. We have to understand that creation has entrusted the Minnesotan people to take care of that land, to look after it, to be good stewards of that land, and also to protect that land. So if you notice in those 3 slides, the focus is on the river. And the reason being is because this is where a pipeline is going to cross. And it's that particular river that will be at risk, that will be in danger. And when we say a river, just don't think the water's in danger. You're going to look at the forest there because all the life that comes to that water is in danger. So the Minnesotan people have a sacred responsibility to take care of the land, the river, and their territory. But as you know, there's a threat. There's a threat that they've been talking about, preparing for, and getting themselves all ready to deal with. And that threat comes in the form of a pipeline. So here we can see, this is CGLs. There's a whole bunch of pipeline routes. We look at all of them, but this is just one in particular. This is CGL. And if you look at, let's see if we can find this. Yeah, there we go. These little dots here, that's the places where they're going to have man camps. And Molly had mentioned that for a moment, and that's an example of a man camp. Not only are they protecting their territory, they're protecting the women and the girls. Because where you have man camps, you have an increase in violence, and you have an increase in sexual violence, particularly towards indigenous women. So these rates go up. So for them, it is a clear and present threat. It's a real danger to the community, to the land, and to the people. And unfortunately, what makes this more complex is, I know it's a little hard to see there, but each one of these green labels is an Indiana Chief and Council who has basically given consent to the pipeline. So this is why we're hearing more about the idea of hereditary chiefs. Because they're the ones that are voicing the concerns of the grassroots people. There is something of a divide. I don't want to give the impression it's a deep divide. I don't want the impression there's like real animosity, but there is something of a divide between the Indiana Chief and Council, their initiative and their work with the pipelines, versus the grassroots, the community members, and the traditional government and the traditional people there, right? And it's very much revealed when you start talking about this kind of issue, where you have Indiana Chief and Council giving consent to what the grassroots and the communities are saying no to. So there is a divide there, and this is why we see attention on the hereditary chiefs, because they come forward and they're the ones that are speaking up on behalf of the grassroots people.
And the land.
And the land. And the land. So we know, for those, I think a lot of people have had the chance to go up to Minnesota, get a chance to see the camp, and we know that there's a camp there that sits right in the pathway of a pipeline. But we also got to remember something. That particular cabin and cabins all over that land didn't just arise because of pipeline. They've been there for thousands of years. That's an area that's been for hunting and trapping and fishing and gathering. So don't just see this as like a protest camp, because really we're missing some of the depths behind this. These are the Minnesotan people actually occupying their land, living on their land. It just so happens that one particular camp lies right in the pathway of the pipelines. So for those who've had a chance to go up there, and experience what it means to be out there, and really the camaraderie and the collective kind of feeling of people coming together to do something, Minnesota's a great place for that. And we've seen how it emerged into become the focal point when you talk about anti-pipeline activities. It became the place where people had talked about this is where the stand will be made. And then this is the gate to Unistone. And of course, it's situated over the river, so we protect that river. And this is really near one of the clan territorial divides. If you notice, Malky was talking about Gitumt'en. This is Unistone. That's two different clans. So what we're seeing is multiple clans taking action, but in a sequential way, in a very synchronized way. And then throughout the years, we've seen, and I can't remember how long it's been, since 2010, I believe, where there's been an active public stance. We've seen the RCMP trying to come in, we've seen pipeline representatives come in many different ways. Most of the time it was they drive right up, or in other times, they'd fly in and get chased off. Unistone then took on another role. It didn't give up its role of protecting the land, and recognized in order to protect the land, you had to heal the people as well as the land itself. And we're talking about from colonial trauma, colonial incursions, colonial encroachment. So there's like a parallel kind of strategy or a parallel approach to what's going on, as well as being a place, a focal point against pipelines. It's also a healing center. It's a place where people go for land-based learning and land-based healing. So it's much more, again, than simply just a protest. It's a place where we see some decolonization going on. Ceremonies, traditional homes and traditional structures being rebuilt on the land. And keep in mind, these existed so much more before. They were just destroyed many times over. They're out there re-indigenizing their land. And that's the pit house they had built a couple of years ago. That is the healing center. I think bunkhouse. And while there, you learn in a very cultural, spiritual way how to reconnect with the land, how to relearn as an indigenous person, how to relearn your identity, your history, and your purpose. What are your responsibilities? What are your clan's responsibilities? In particular, with the relationship to the land and the life of it. So in doing so, they do a lot of land-based activity, because this land-based activity connects you back. So don't think of it as like a hobby, a fun activity to get outside. It's not just seen as an outdoor activity. This is truly not just physical, but a spiritual activity that works in conjunction with the physical presence of being on the land. Hunting, you would see hunting. And again, it's not just a mechanical aspect, it's also the spiritual. So they're praying and giving thanks to the animals giving up their life so that they can continue to go on. So people that are learning how to be back on the land, they're learning how to do it the right way, or as elders would say, in a good way. They're learning how to give back thanks and how to have a proper relationship of reciprocity and reverence to that which gives to us and takes care of us. And here we see making use of all the animals to show respect to it. And then also workshops around healing and ceremonies and time for reflection, a time to withdraw from the daily ADHD kind of lifestyle we all have and start to really contemplate in a very deep, meaningful way about who we are and the responsibilities that we're supposed to carry out. And then another part of our story is about the Predatory Chiefs and Supreme Court decisions. So here we have some of the Predatory Chiefs and also Korea. And I know it's a little bit hard to see, but each one of these, each one of these colors, each one of these colors represents a different clan territories that they're responsible for. Notice I'm saying the word responsible. I don't like the word ownership or private property. That's very much a Western, European understanding of what they think of land. This is responsibility. It means you are taking care of that land for the next generations. You're responsible for all the life of that land. It is not a commodity. You have been handed a responsibility so that next generations can have the same kind of relationship you have with that land. So when you think of that, try to stay away from the words property, ownership, and really think responsibility. And the Delgama case, I was kind of planning on really talking about that a lot, not because I like law, I really can't stand it. Colonial law, it's an imposition of Western laws on our lands that are designed to take away indigenous land from indigenous people. But even in these arguments, we hear things like Aboriginal title and rights come up. And Delgama was like one of these foundational court cases. This is the area. The Gitumt'en and the Wet'suwet'en were the people in the Delgama case. They were the ones that had spoke about their oral tradition and their relationship with the land. They're the ones that had won that case. And the lower case rulings went against them, but when they got to the Supreme Court level, they had won. And there was an understanding that their Aboriginal title was vested in the Wet'suwet'en people there. The question was, what does that look like? And the court had said, well, that has to be kind of fleshed out in future cases. So, there's a lot of things here I would disagree with, like the idea that in the Supreme Court case, they said that the land is only alienable to the Crown. What they're saying is indigenous people can only give up their land to the Crown. One, I don't believe we should be giving up the land at all, period. But if we were, who's to say that the Crown has a monopoly on who we give it to? Right? It's just a way to ensure that they get it. They're the ones that get our land, right? It's just part of how they set up their land systems, right? And then here we just kind of see the evolution of the idea of Aboriginal title through the Calder case, the Deering case, and then Delgama, and most recently the Gitumt'en case. And really what it comes down to is they're saying that Aboriginal title is more than just use and occupancy. It also is the idea of responsibility, authority, jurisdiction. They're attaching governance ideas around this. Now that sounds powerful, right? It sounds like, wow, you know, shouldn't they have a powerful court case that would keep pipelines out of their territory? Well, it's strange, but indigenous experience around Supreme Court law is that it's almost forgotten the very next day. Where they talk about martial decision or that, the minute the ruling comes out, it's never put into effect in a way that protects indigenous people. That's the same thing happened here because we saw an injunction in December against the Wet'suwet'en people. They were, basically it was a way to bypass the question of Aboriginal title and say that Unist'ot'en Camp is denying the pipeline of making money. They were an obstacle to them making money, so they have to be removed. So it was a great way to not talk about Aboriginal title. And then we know the ruling went against them. And here they're speaking about their disappointment with the injunction ruling. And then the response to that was, the Wet'suwet'en people, the Predatory Chiefs, wanted to show that Unist'ot'en wasn't in this alone. That the other clans also wanted to show their support. So they wanted to put up a checkpoint, not a camp, but at least a checkpoint. And as you go through the road that goes from Houston to Unist'ot'en, you're going through Gitumt'en territory. So they decided to put up a checkpoint that reflected the support of all the clans. It just happens since when Gitumt'en territory, it's kind of spoken about that way. But really the camp was for all the other clans outside of Unist'ot'en to show their support. So Molly is a spokesperson for the Predatory Chiefs. But she was also instrumental in putting a checkpoint up. Like, she did all like the organizing, the planning, getting people involved, and getting out there and making it happen. Amazing amount of work. And I think it was about the second or third day in camp, they had one of the community members had finished this flag that's going to be, I think they're going to adopt it as their nation flag, because it shows all 5 clans protecting a picture of their territory, of their land. Unfortunately, during the raid, that flag was burned. Partially, anyways. I think they still have, it's probably about 60% intact, but 40% of it got burned. So here they're starting to build the camp. They're starting to prepare what Molly referred to as 44. That's the 44-kilometer mark, and that's the camp. And we see them setting up. Great shot there at night. It is like probably minus 25. Great shot, but probably very chilly. And while there, in a short period of time the camp existed, it was up like 2 or 3 weeks, they were running interviews, handling the media, doing their own stuff that they were putting up on their website and YouTube. So it became a real focal point to draw attention to what they knew. They're anticipating some kind of raid or some kind of fight. And there's Molly doing some interviews. And this is the checkpoint as you come in. But then we know shortly, right around the first week of January, there was a buildup of RCMP in Smithers, Houston, and Burns Lake. And on January 7th, they went in. And this is around kilometer marker 27, and this is where they blocked off any more incoming traffic, so nobody could go and support the checkpoint or Unistone. So they're basically denying anybody else any entry from coming in. This is the checkpoint getting ready. And then we can see in the far distance, this is when RCMP just start to arrive. There was a lot more vehicles, but they're just starting to arrive. And the first people to arrive were the division liaison team. These are the natives that work for RCMP. If you ever had to deal with this, it really feels sleazy, greasy. I don't know how to explain it, but you really feel gross watching other indigenous people work for the colonizer to impose force on you. Because in the talks that they had, they made all kinds of promises, and Molly had told me that they just lied and lied and lied, basically to buy time for RCMP to set up, to get ready to do their raid. And here's Molly, I believe this is the point where she's demanding that they hold off the raid until the Predatory Chiefs come up, because there was only 2 of them at the camp, I believe, at that time. So they're waiting for the rest of the Predatory Chiefs. I think the RCMP gave them a couple of hours to allow them to come up. And in here we see the liaison team talking to Madik. He's one of the Predatory Chiefs that was on site. And again, we see him talking to them. Unfortunately, what had happened was behind the scenes, a lawyer was telling the Predatory Chiefs, don't go. Now keep in mind, that was the plan. The people at the checkpoint are waiting. They're holding the checkpoint, waiting for the Predatory Chiefs who are supposed to show up and regale you and be the first to get arrested, to show that it was the nation being arrested, as all head clan chiefs were all getting arrested, all representing the different clans of their nation. They wanted to show that they're all in this together. But at the last moment, the lawyer had urged them not to go and said, well, to me, it was my opinion, it was fear-mongering, because he was telling them, if you go and you're in jail, we can't coordinate with you, we can't do any work, you'll be useless in jail. So at the very last moment, he talked the Predatory Chiefs from going up there. There was only a few that were on site. So there's influence or pressure going on behind the scenes. And then once the police were aware that's not going to happen, they decided to come in for the raid. And then the people there had to hold off the cops on their own. Take special note down here. There's a couple people underneath there, right? They had themselves locked to the gate, so it just can't be just ripped open. And then there's a special operations RCMP team designed now specifically to do this kind of work. Protect pipeline construction and take down barriers and protesters and activists, right? And this is the first, we've seen of this particular unit. There was others like this before. He's the first of them, or the first sight of this unit. And again, they're showing up, and in case anybody didn't catch that, that's a sniper rifle. As is that one, that's an assault rifle, that's a sniper rifle. I don't know if you guys caught all the memes. Someone really really nailed it. I wish I caught the other one, I didn't, but it focused on this, and they would call them reconciliation sticks. I think it really did a lot to show us the hypocrisy at national level talking about reconciliation while you're invading indigenous territory. And then the invasion begins. And they start to cut down the barrier. I don't have a picture of it. I looked all over for it and I couldn't find it. And I didn't give Molly enough time to send me a picture. They started to use a chainsaw. And they're cutting through the gate. Remember I said those 2 guys that are below with arms? The protesters on this side were yelling at them to stop. These people were down here. Well, I guess apparently they heard one of the cops say something like, we don't care, or it doesn't matter, or something to that effect. But somewhere in the cutting, they were stopped. And when they did that, they started to try to find a different way. And here they're trying to go around the barricade, but down here is the frozen river, right below them, because it's on a bridge. So they decided to go over, and there's a lot of the photos I think a lot of people saw of them coming over the top of the barricade, coming over the walls. Barbarians at the gates. It's funny how that kind of analogy can be used one way, though, And as soon as they get over, they want to affect the gates open, and they start making arrests. They start taking down people immediately. And here's where they start to get through, and then they push forward from the gate and the bridge over to the camp. And this is when we see the mass arrests, and I believe there was a total of 14 made at that time. See all the arrests being made. And then what happened was there was a delay tactic used to slow down the police. Again, the ultimate objective for the RCMP was Stoughton camp. The checkpoint, don't think of it like a stronghold, it's just a checkpoint. It's a small, light obstacle, right? Not a whole lot there, but their job was to slow everything down, to buy time for people to come in and help Stoughton, or the media, or Predatory Chiefs. Their job was just to delay an action. So once the gate was penetrated, they started setting up bonfires in the areas to slow down the RCMP traffic, and also took down some trees over the roads, and it bought them some real time. It helped them like almost 24 hours of time. And this is the time though, oh yeah, I can't forget this guy. Can you see him up there on the pole? Right there? Mm-hmm. The pole was rigged underneath, I think it was the bus. And he was out on the end of the pole, so basically they couldn't move the bus without him dropping into the frozen river. And they didn't know how to deal with that for hours. They couldn't figure out how did they deal with that. They weren't prepared for it, right? I think they tried to go out there, but they were being told, don't, it's a safety issue. And the RCMP didn't have, I think they mentioned PFDs, their personal flotation devices, didn't have the safety equipment. So it did, it created the delays they needed. But then eventually the RCMP took 44. And we see them setting up, they set up what was called an exclusion zone at 27, and they didn't allow anybody in, and you probably heard they didn't allow media in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
illegal.
it was selective. AB10 was trying to do a report on this, and AB10 was told, are you on the list to get through? And they said, no, we didn't know it was a list. They said, well, they're not coming through. So there's select media that was allowed to speak to RCMP. But all other media that were, I guess I'm assuming, deemed unfriendly, were stopped at that point at the exclusion zone. And then we know the next 24 hours or so was the question of forcing open the gates at Stoughton. People came in behind the police, or I should say in front of the police at 27. They started gathering, trying to put pressure, but there was a big looming feeling of the unknown and feeling what's going to happen next. Because they know the police are going up to raid Stoughton, but the Predatory Chiefs are trying to talk to the RCMP to figure out what's going to happen. And here's Radik again. This, I believe, is at Stoughton, and he's updating everybody as best he can about what's happening, what's going on with the meeting with Predatory Chiefs. And we know there was some kind of deals agreed to. Now, this is important to know. When we were having meetings, I was talking with them meeting Molly and the Predatory Chiefs. They had said the agreement that they had was verbal with the RCMP. That the RCMP insisted that they're the first ones to go to Stoughton before the Predatory Chiefs. And they get to tell the people at Stoughton the terms and conditions of this agreement. So they didn't think that's an issue. Unfortunately, it's putting a little bit of trust in the RCMP to say the right thing. And that's not what happened. So the RCMP comes up from Stoughton, and we know they were told that they need to open the gates. But the people in Stoughton only knew that was the outcome of the deal. They didn't know what the other details were. And the police apparently started lying about what they can do. And they kept saying, oh, the Predatory Chief said this is okay. For instance, bringing heavy equipment through and stuff. The deal was only to allow the initial surveyors of the coastal gas unit to come in. Not heavy equipment, not construction stuff, nothing.